about what that could be.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So Dia, to that point, and kind of thinking about this as an industry, which it is, and how many industries across our nation have actually been impacted by COVID. Have you seen any impact on your business or for the industry as it relates to the cannabis industry and any COVID-19 impact, whether positive or negative? Because I think in some instances, people think that, COVID is only creating a destructive moment for most businesses. And there are businesses that are actually faring well during this moment. So I don't know if cannabis might be an industry that might be doing well, given the heightened level of anxiety and things that people are experiencing during this time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm in both cannabis and spirits, and there was a lot of benefit during this time. It's been a difficult time, obviously, but from a purely business standpoint, the fact, one, that a lot of the cannabis dispensaries were declared essential during shutdowns was quite a critical and important point for lobbyists when they are lobbying regulatory. Because it's difficult to say, well, something's not federally legal, but yet it's deemed essential in some of the largest states in the United States. So that was actually quite beneficial. And yes, people are, there was increased consumption, I think, particularly because obviously anxiety is at an all-time high. I mean, 2020, it could be like a dragon at your door any day. So absolutely. And the same in spirits. You saw, it's been difficult to see how restaurants and hotels, some of their business has been eviscerated. But on the flip side, some novel, not really novel, but some antiquated things that have been in the books were temporarily lifted. So before you order dinner for delivery, you could not order spirits. That's kind of silly at this point, right? Because we're all adult, and if you're an adult and you're already paying for your steak or your delicious vegan taco, whatever it is, and you'd also like to have a glass of mezcal, why can't you show your ID at the door, right? So those were lifted. And it really saved a lot of restaurants from closing down. And it was good for the spirits industry, good for restaurants, good for economy, good for jobs. So we're all hopeful that these short-term fixes become long-term solutions, because it's actually to the benefit, it's to the greater benefit of the community.
Got it. I love it. And I was thinking that, because as I mentioned, so many of us have gone through different, I know for myself, I'll speak for myself personally, different moments of anxiety during, we're still in this pandemic, right? I think we've all figured out a way to cope and deal with it during this moment. But it has been definitely very challenging. And you're right. The dispensaries were deemed to be essential businesses. And I think that was a pivotal moment for the industry, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to have that type of classification during that time. So Dia, as we kind of start to wrap up our conversation today, I want to have, an opportunity to ask you some general questions about women of color and women in leadership and, and just in general. You've talked about, the vastness of the different types of jobs that you've had, which I love to hear, right? Because as you started off, you talked about there was no linear path for you. And I think so many people think that there is, right? And so what do you say both to the young woman who is either just coming out of college and trying to figure out what am I going to do, and I'm graduating in the middle of this COVID craziness, or the woman who just recently got laid off from her job and is saying to herself, what am I going to do in the middle of this COVID craziness? Obviously, at two different points of life, but asking the same fundamental question.
Yeah, no, it's enormously just tricky times, but I think the simplest thing, and this is not for everybody, but really consider entrepreneurship. And I can't say this like often and loudly enough, and this is why I love what you do at Walker's Legacy. To my point of view, this should be part of your curriculum in first, second, third grade, right? And I don't know that we are really equipped. In fact, I love Natalie, how I noticed you, to your point, I think we're both on the same page of how important lexicon is. And in the beginning of your video, you don't just say we inspire, you say we equip. That's the difference, right? In terms of like, you could be inspired to climb a mountain, but if you don't have the rappelling equipment or right resources, you can't do it. If you're in a situation now where like, I have got to figure out how to bring income into my life, and there are a lot of opportunities sitting even in disaster, and also sometimes do the math. I don't want to judge anybody, but a lot of people don't take the time to do the math of, you think you make whatever it is. Let's say you think you make $75,000, but what are you taking home every day, right? Because when you look at the difference in the tax treatment when you run your own business versus being an employee, it is significant. It is quite significant. So take the time to say, let me do the math. What am I good at? What skill can I provide? I think narrow focus yields broad results. And there is honor in all work. So you may have been I was a VP, I was making this. And then you do the math and realize, I was only taking home, 59% of that money. I'm not going to be a VP. I'm going to be hardworking, but running this franchise, running this hot dog cart, being the best nail tech I can be. But you actually could make more money if that's what you're in it for, right? There are so many gaps happening right now in terms of, like whether you want to have your cleaning picked up at home because you're scared to go out, whether there's deep cleaning services that are needed because of the fact that people are now much more conscious about like, oh golly, I'm scared. It's a pandemic, but it's just, who knows, it could be more. How am I taking care of myself and my family? There's an opportunity for pod instruction, right? So there's so many kids doing virtual learning right now, but if you have one or two parents who are working, it's not easy just to be like, I'm gonna be a teacher and work. There's a lot of opportunity to say, well, I can come for these services. You don't have to necessarily be a teacher and say, I will sit with 3 kids. I will charge you, whatever it is, $250 a day, but I'll split it up between the 3 families. There are, in the midst of these challenges, look to your left and right and think about what you're naturally good at, what you will be doing anyway, and how you monetize it. There's room. The world is abundant. There's room for it.
I love it too, because one of the things I say to my team all the time, and it's something I heard, which is in Chinese, the character for chaos is the same one for opportunity. And so, as you mentioned, looking to your left and looking to your right to see what exists, and also kind of taking the time to kind of frame the life that you want. That's kind of what I got from what you said too, dear, right? Which is like, okay, I may be home and I may be with my children, I might be a teacher, this might be difficult for me. Is there another way that I can do both of these things at the same time, given that in some regards, technology has made it more difficult because we're all at home, but it's also leveled the playing field for things that I can do because I'm home and I don't have to be on the road. I mean, Dia, you and I both know that prior to COVID, we were on the road. I mean, that was part of the uncalculated hours and the tax of being, successful and being out here in the face of our respective efforts is that you're on the road. And I've taken time myself to think, do I really need to be on the road as much as I was on the road before? Like, why was I always on the road? Is that necessary? And I think all of us also know that we're not going to go back to life as we used to know it. We're going to go into a hybrid of life as we know it now and life as we used to know it. And that's going to be life as it will be. So, it's kind of like a relationship. You can't just go back to it because it's not going to be the same. It's not the same moment in time, not the same age. You don't have the same circumstances going on. Be back up, but it's going to be a different situation. So
you're totally right.
To think about, themselves and their lives in that capacity. And the other thing that I love that you said, Dia, when we first started was you didn't care what your title was, right? And this is the moment for humility. And I'm going to ask you a question about humility in a second, but Cheryl talks about the fact too that you don't ask what seat you're going to have on a rocket ship. You just get on the thing, right? So it doesn't matter if you were called the executive assistant. At the end of the day, as you mentioned, your coins were your coins. Okay. And your title was your title, but you knew you were being prepared for something else. And so there's probably someone right now that is graduating or just got laid off and may have an opportunity sitting in front of them. And they're saying to themselves, I'm better than this, right? I did all this at school. I got top grades, or I was the executive of this, and that. And I deserve to have better than this right now. And that may very well be true. But I would also say take heed on opportunities that present themselves and be entrepreneurial, because you never know, as you were, Dia, where you may go with what opportunity was presented to you at that moment. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And it speaks to a lot of things about taking risk, about not being scared to negotiate. And that if you have a chance to get on the rocket ship, get on the ship. It doesn't matter if you have the knowledge. Maybe you didn't have a chance to read the manual. I think we also suffer from this idea that there's some real big difference between us and Bezos and us and the king of the. It's not. Like literally all human beings share 99.5% of the same genome pattern. That's just a fact. If aliens came, they would look at us like different color ants, right? We're not as different as we think you are. And I've been fortunate to be in rooms with with, you know, multi-billionaires, huge, brilliant people. And the reality is, maybe I couldn't fly a rocket. Maybe it would take me 3 years where it would take somebody a month to learn about jet propulsion, but I can do it. And all of us can do it. So like, you have to think through this idea that these things are not available to you. In real life, I know for sure, I'm fortunate to like travel around, to your point, and I have met so many people who are like, well, I think I'll be very happy to get to here. And if you're very happy, that's actually the real goal. But if you're holding yourself back because you think there's some missing information or skills when information has been democratized because of technology, just go ahead and you can figure it out on the way. I promise you can figure it out. There are tons of studies that show how, and hopefully this is changing, but historically, men will apply to jobs even if the job description does not match their actual skill sets. They don't care. They're like, I'll figure it out, I can do it. Women will actually look at it and check, oh, I don't know how to do these 3 things. I don't apply. Just apply. Nobody knows how to do everything. You have to figure it out along the way and be willing to take risk.
And so let's dovetail that taking risk into humility, because they almost kind of go hand in hand a little bit, right? So it's almost like you have to be humble enough to know that there's going to be some stuff you don't know about this next journey that you're taking, right? And if you want to get to another space with your career or opportunities or whatever, it's good to not know everything, right? Because that means that you're leveling up, right? If you always know everything, that means that you're probably staying in the same stratosphere of where you were. So you want to level up, which means now I don't know everything. Like, have you ever had a moment where you've been humbled, but you recovered from the humility and turned that into a moment of definition for maybe your career or a business venture that you had?
You know, so you said a lot. You said a lot of good stuff there. So I think one, it's really important. I think that one is, Puff would always say this. He said, we have to hire people who make us better. Right? So like the idea is like you hire somebody, you don't hire somebody smart so you tell them what to do. You hire somebody smart so they tell you what to do. Right? So I think you got to come with that approach. I often say, not to be on a like just t-shirt mantras, but like I always say, like everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach. So like you have to live in that level of being humble, because the brightest people are always seeking more and more knowledge. I don't want to be around people who think they know everything, because that's going to be a fruitless room for me. I want to be in a room as much as I can where I'd love to be in a room where let me be the dumbest person in the room. Let me be the less expensive house on the block, right? Because I got nothing but room to grow from there. So I think it's important that you seek company that inspires you. I'm really fortunate, just literally my friends that I've had since I was 8 years old, just really bad, kind, amazing women. And it's true that iron sharpens iron. So, you know, as you think about how you're humble and you take risks, you have to think about the people you spend your time with and are they inspirational to you. That's incredibly important. In terms of a specific moment, let me think, golly. Let's see. I would say it was a real aha moment for me. In my 20s, I worked as a like a promoter with, if anybody, you know, maybe dating myself, but gentleman named Mark Barnes, probably one of the best.
You're not dating yourself. You don't know who Mark was or is. You don't know about nightlife. Okay, so
nightlife, and he was very It was the first time it occurred to me. And at the time, I used to work for the Department of Defense. That's my previous, I was doing like contract negotiations. But it was like I was a federal government employee. Great learning, but I was going along that like, well, let me just continue to be an employee. And I started to do the math of how much money was going through this account. It was called Republic Gardens. It was a small, beautiful venue, but thousands of people would go through every night. So I started thinking through like, well, how much does this cost per person? This many days a week, per drink. And I added up and said, this is making millions and millions of dollars a year. And at that point, I might have been like 23. And it just hadn't occurred to me that like, oh, one little lounge on U Street in DC is making millions of dollars. And it was humbling because I said to myself, like, what are you doing with your time? Because you're working hard. Like, it's not like you're not working hard, working for being an employee. I was like, so I could be working just as hard and be out here figuring out how to make millions. And it was a real moment that I think kind of changed my pathway to figuring out how I could be more entrepreneurship. Because it's like, you're going to do the work anyway. Right. How can I have something where I'm going to reap the benefits, where my 7-year-old daughter is going to reap the benefits from it? And it was, it definitely was humbling because it made me reshape my approach.
I love it. So, you know, one of the things that